Dr. Ta-Wu Park stood at the edge of the landing site, his eyes scanning the alien horizon of Proxima b. After 6 years in cryosleep aboard the research vessel Endeavour, they had finally arrived. The planet's twin suns cast an amber glow across the rocky terrain, illuminating the distant crystalline structures that the survey drones had identified as settlements of the native species. "Readings are stable," said Su Bin, the team's environmental specialist. She tapped at her wrist device. "Atmosphere is within tolerable limits, though I recommend we keep helmets on until we're sure." Tai Wu nodded. His 6-person team had trained for a decade for this moment. Humanity's first direct contact with an intelligent alien species, the Nari, as they called themselves in the limited communications they'd established from orbit, appeared peaceful and curious about their arrival. "Let's set up the base camp," Ta Wu instructed. "Du Hyun, get the habitat modules online. Minji and Jun, secure the perimeter. Su Bin and Yanho, begin atmospheric sampling." As the team moved with practiced efficiency, Ta Wu couldn't help but feel a mix of excitement and unease. Everything seemed too perfect. The breathable air, the tolerable gravity, the apparently welcoming natives. In his experience, when things seemed too good to be true, they usually were. The habitat modules unfolded automatically, forming a small compound within hours. As night fell, strange bioluminescent plants began to glow in the surrounding terrain, casting the landscape in soft blues and purples. "It's beautiful," Minji said, joining Ta Wu outside the main module. As the team's xenobiologist, she was eager to study the local flora. "I've never seen anything like it." "We'll begin cataloging tomorrow," Ta Wu replied. "First, we need to establish formal contact with the Nari." In the morning, the team gathered their research equipment and diplomatic packages, carefully selected items that represented human culture and technology. Earth's governments had spent years debating what would be appropriate gifts for a first contact scenario. "Remember," Ta Wu briefed his team, "we observe first. No sudden movements. Follow first contact protocols exactly as trained. The translation matrix is still learning their language, so we'll rely heavily on universal gestures and mathematical communications." They walked in formation toward the main Nari settlement, a collection of tall, spiral structures that seemed to be grown rather than built. As they approached, several figures emerged from the central building. "There," Du Hyun hesitated, "not what I expected." The Nari stood approximately 2 meters tall, with slender bodies covered in a fine, iridescent fur that shifted colors in the sunlight. Their 4 arms ended in 7-fingered hands, and their faces featured large, multifaceted eyes that reminded Ta Wu of insect eyes, but with a distinctly mammalian structure around them. The lead Nari approached, stopping a respectful distance away. It made a series of melodic clicking sounds that the translation matrix in Ta Wu's helmet attempted to process. "Greetings, sky travelers. Welcome to home," came the stilted translation. Ta Wu stepped forward, careful to move slowly. "We come in peace from Earth. We seek knowledge and friendship." He held out his hands, palms up, a gesture they hoped would be universal enough to signal peaceful intentions. The Nari leader mimicked his gesture with its upper set of arms, while the lower pair performed a complex pattern that the translation matrix couldn't interpret. Over the next few hours, the humans set up a temporary research station at the edge of the Nari settlement. The aliens showed remarkable patience as the translation matrix slowly improved with each exchange. By evening, Ta Wu had learned that the Nari society was based around knowledge collection and preservation. They had developed technology in different ways than humans, focusing on biological adaptations rather than mechanical ones, but had achieved a level of advancement that suggested they might be centuries ahead of Earth in some areas. Their medical technology alone could revolutionize human healthcare. Minji told Ta Wu excitedly as they returned to their camp. "They don't get sick the way we do. They can regrow limbs. And their energy systems are incredible," added Yunho. "No fossil fuels, no nuclear. They harvest energy directly from their planet's magnetic field." Wu cautioned the team against too much enthusiasm. Remember, we're here to observe and learn, not to acquire. Trust has to be established first. That night, as the team reviewed their findings, Jun noticed movement on the perimeter sensors. "We have a visitor," he announced. On the screen, a solitary Nari moved carefully toward their camp. Unlike the others they had met, this one appeared to be wearing some kind of decorative markings across its fur. "Should we go out to meet it?" Subin asked. "No," Wu decided. "Let's see what it wants. Keep observation protocols active." The Nari approached Wu's personal tent rather than the main module, suggesting it had been watching and had identified him as the leader. It stopped outside, making a series of musical sounds that the Matrix couldn't translate yet. "I think it wants to speak with you alone," Du-hyun suggested. Wu nodded. "Keep monitoring. If anything seems wrong, intervene." He stepped outside to greet the visitor. The Nari's fur changed color as he approached, shifting to a deep blue that seemed to pulse with internal light. "Hello," Wu said simply. The Nari made a graceful motion with all four arms, then pointed to itself. "Mirai," it said clearly. Then it pointed toward the settlement and made a series of gestures that the Matrix translated haltingly as knowledge and study. "You're a researcher," Wu realized. "Like us." Mirai's eyes shifted, the facets catching the light of the habitat's external lamps. It nodded, a gesture it must have learned from observing the humans. This unexpected midnight visit from a Nari researcher marked the beginning of what would become the most important cultural exchange in human history. Though neither Wu nor Mirai could have possibly predicted the momentous events their meeting would set in motion. Mirai moved silently through the bioluminescent forest, careful not to disturb the delicate ecosystem as she made her way toward the human encampment. The strange visitors had been on Nari land for 7 days now, and while the official delegation maintained formal contact, Mirai had been chosen for a more important task: to understand these beings beyond diplomatic pleasantries. As the youngest knowledge keeper in 3 generations, Mirai had earned the right to lead this study. Her ability to observe patterns in behavior had already helped her people advance their understanding of several native species. But humans were something entirely different, creatures from beyond the stars. They cover themselves in artificial skins, she recorded into her memory crystal, even when the temperature does not require it. The coverings appear to serve social functions beyond physical protection. From her hidden observation post among the crystal trees, Mirai watched as the human called Wu directed his team. He was clearly the dominant member, though his leadership style was different from Nari leaders. He consulted the others frequently, especially the females, Subin and Minji, whose expertise he seemed to value highly. "Their social hierarchy is fluid," Mirai noted. "They exchange roles based on specialized knowledge rather than age or physical attributes." As twilight approached, Mirai moved closer, using the growing shadows to conceal her approach. The humans had established a routine over the past week: night observations, morning meetings, afternoon expeditions. Their predictability made them easier to study. The one called Eunho emerged from the main structure, carrying a device that emitted focused light. He swept it across the perimeter, passing it within meters of where Mirai hid behind a boulder. She froze, her fur shifting to match the stone's pattern and texture, a natural camouflage ability her people had evolved millennia ago. "All clear," Eunho called back toward the camp. "Just the usual night critters." When he returned inside, Mirai continued her observation. Through the transparent sections of their structures, she could see the humans engaging in what appeared to be a communal eating ritual. They sat in a circle, passing containers and using small tools to place nutrients into their mouths. "They require frequent fuel intake," she recorded, "and they transform the process into a social bonding activity." The most puzzling aspect of human behavior, in Mirai's assessment, was their constant covering and uncovering. Each human would disappear into private chambers to remove layers, only to emerge with different layers. This was entirely unlike Nari custom, where one's natural form was considered the most honest presentation of self. After 3 hours of evening observation, Mireille retreated to her own dwelling deeper in the forest. The circular chamber, grown from living crystal using ancient Nari techniques, hummed with the collected knowledge of her studies. Holographic images of the humans floated in the air as she transferred her observations from her memory crystal to the main repository. Elder Siuk, her mentor, materialized in the chamber, his presence projected from the central knowledge hub across the settlement. "What have you learned, young one?" his image asked, 4 arms folded in the traditional pose of inquiry. "They are contradictions," Mireille replied. "Technologically advanced enough for interstellar travel, yet socially primitive in many ways. They hide their true forms from each other. They separate themselves into small sleeping chambers instead of sharing the communal rest space." "And their intentions?" Elder Siuk pressed. "Curiosity drives them more than conquest," Mireille concluded. "Their leader, Tawu, restrains the others when they show too much interest in our technology. They seem genuinely interested in knowledge exchange." Elder Siuk's image flickered as he processed this information. "The Council requires more. We must understand their customs more deeply before proceeding with the knowledge-sharing ceremony." "I have been observing only," Mireille admitted. "Perhaps direct interaction would yield better results." "Dangerous," Elder Siuk cautioned. "But perhaps necessary. What approach do you suggest?" Mireille's fur rippled with the blue hues of deep thought. "Their leader is the key. I believe I should approach him directly, following our traditional protocols for first knowledge exchange." Elder Siuk's image showed concern through a rapid color shift to amber. "They may not understand our ways. Our research suggests their species has strong taboos around physical form." "All knowledge begins with risk," Mireille quoted from the ancient teachings. "I will approach when he is alone, to minimize potential misunderstandings." After long consideration, Elder Siuk agreed. "Proceed with caution, young knowledge keeper. Wear the formal markings of your office. Make it clear your approach is official and scholarly." The next day, Mireille spent hours preparing. She applied the sacred pigments to her fur, intricate patterns that identified her as a knowledge keeper of the highest order. These markings, visible even when her camouflage abilities were active, would signal to any knowledgeable being that she came in an official capacity. "The humans value coverings," she reasoned to herself. "But among the Nari, truth is found in one's natural form. I must present myself honestly if I am to establish genuine communication." As night fell, Mireille approached the human camp once more, this time with no intention of hiding. She carried only a small translation crystal, the most advanced technology her people possessed, capable of learning languages through direct exposure. The sensors around the human encampment detected her immediately. Lights turned in her direction, and she heard voices raised in alarm. Undeterred, Mireille continued forward, her 4 arms held in the traditional greeting position. Upper limbs open to the sky, lower limbs extended forward, palms up. She bypassed the main structure, heading directly for the smaller dwelling where Tawu spent his private hours. Her research indicated this would be where important discussions should take place, away from subordinates, in the space where a leader contemplated decisions. Outside his dwelling, she paused, allowing the human monitoring systems to fully record her presence. Then, following Nari custom for approaching a foreign knowledge holder, she made the musical announcement of scholarly intent, a series of tones that identified her role and purpose. "I come seeking understanding," she sang in her native language, knowing the translation crystal would begin adapting to facilitate communication. "I am Mireille, keeper of knowledge, student of the unknown." Then she waited, her fur glowing with the blue markings of her office, for the human leader to acknowledge her presence and begin what she hoped would be the true first contact between their worlds. Not the formal, cautious diplomatic meetings, but a genuine exchange between scholars. Little did she know how differently humans interpreted such approaches, or how this well-intentioned scholarly visit was about to create the most significant cultural misunderstanding in interspecies history. Wu sat in his personal tent reviewing the day's data. The team had made significant progress understanding Nari technology, particularly their remarkable ability to grow structures from living crystal. His tablet displayed chemical analysis that suggested possibilities far beyond what human science had achieved. A soft alert from his communication device interrupted his concentration. "Movement outside your quarters, sir," came Jun's voice. "It's one of them. Alone." Wu set down his tablet. "I see it on the monitors. Any aggressive signs?" "No, but it's different from the others we've met. Has some kind of markings all over. And it's coming straight for your tent." Wu took a deep breath. First contact protocols emphasized remaining calm during unexpected scenarios. "I'll handle it. Keep observation active, but don't intervene unless I signal." The tent's entrance sensor chimed, indicating a visitor. Wu adjusted his uniform and opened the flexible doorway. What he saw made him freeze in momentary shock. Standing before him was a Neri, but unlike the others they had met during formal exchanges, this one appeared to be wearing almost nothing except for intricate blue patterns painted directly onto its iridescent fur. The patterns pulsed with a soft glow in the darkness. The Neri made a series of musical sounds and extended all four hands in what appeared to be a greeting gesture. It then stood waiting, its large, faceted eyes fixed on Wu. Wu swallowed hard, immediately realizing he faced a cultural situation well outside the parameters of their training. He stepped back, maintaining eye contact while reaching slowly for his translation device. "Hello," he said carefully. "I am Wu, leader of the Earth expedition." His translator attempted to convert his words into the Neri language, producing a sequence of clicks and tones that sounded rough compared to the visitor's melodic speech. Through his earpiece, he could hear the chatter of his team monitoring the situation. "What is it doing?" Minji's voice came through. "Unknown," replied Duhyun, "but its markings appear deliberate. Some kind of status indicator, perhaps." The Nari spoke again, the translation coming through in fragments. "I. Mira, knowledge, study, exchange, truth form." Wu's mind raced. The visitor had identified itself as Mire, and something about knowledge and study. This was likely some kind of scholarly approach, but the lack of coverings was confusing. Among humans, such an appearance would be highly inappropriate for a formal meeting. "Dr. Park," Subin's voice came urgently through his earpiece. "Our cultural database suggests this might be a formal presentation. Many Earth cultures historically use body decoration for ceremonial purposes. The patterns are too precise to be random." "Agreed." Wu muttered quietly into his communicator before addressing Mire again. "Please, would you like to come inside?" He gestured to the interior of his tent, maintaining a professional demeanor despite his discomfort. Mire entered the tent with fluid grace, all four arms moving in coordinated patterns that seemed to have specific meaning. The translator struggled to keep up with the complex language. "Show, true self, knowledge exchange, highest honor." Understanding began to dawn on Wu. This was some kind of formal scholarly exchange, and Mire's appearance was likely ceremonial. Still, human standards of propriety made the situation awkward. "One moment, please," he said, retrieving a spare expedition jacket from his storage unit. He held it out to Mire. "In human custom, we cover our bodies during formal meetings. Perhaps you would honor our tradition while I respect yours." Mire's fur shifted color slightly, the facets of its eyes adjusting as it studied the offered garment. After a moment of apparent consideration, it accepted the jacket, examining it curiously before draping it over its upper torso. "Different customs," the translator managed from Mire's response. "Neri, truth in natural form. Humans, truth in covering." Wu nodded, relieved that Mire seemed to grasp the cultural difference. "Yes, exactly. Different customs. For humans, covering ourselves is respectful in formal situations." He gestured to two seats at a small work table. "Please sit. I believe you came here to exchange knowledge." As they sat facing each other, Wu noticed a small crystal device Mire placed on the table between them. It began to glow more brightly as they spoke, seemingly absorbing and processing their languages. "This technology," Wu indicated the crystal, "it helps with translation." Mire's response came through more clearly now. "Knowledge crystal. Learns. Adapts. Bridges understanding between different minds." Over the next hour, their conversation became progressively more fluid as the crystal improved its translation capabilities. Wu learned that Mire was indeed a scholar, specifically a knowledge keeper tasked with studying the humans, and facilitating cultural exchange. In our society, Mireille explained, knowledge keepers approach new species in natural form, wearing only the sacred markings of our order. To cover oneself during first knowledge exchange would be considered dishonest, hiding one's true nature. Ta Wu nodded with growing understanding. For humans, it's almost the opposite. Covering ourselves in formal settings shows respect and professionalism. Being unclothed is considered intimate, reserved for private situations. Miri's fur rippled with what Ta Wu now recognized as the nari equivalent of thoughtful consideration. Fascinating contradiction. Your species covers to show respect. Mine uncovers for the same purpose. Outside the tent, the research team continued monitoring the exchange, their initial alarm giving way to professional interest. "This is incredible," Min Chai whispered to Su Bin as they watched the feed. "A complete inversion of social norms regarding body presentation. Could have been a diplomatic disaster," Su Bin replied. "Good thing Dr. Park handled it with such composure." By the time Mary prepared to leave 2 hours later, both beings had gained valuable insights into their respective cultures. The initial awkwardness had transformed into the foundation of genuine cross-species understanding. "Tomorrow," Mira said, now wearing the jacket comfortably, "I will bring proper coverings to honor your customs. You have taught me much about human ways. And you have taught me about Nari traditions," Ta Wu replied. This misunderstanding may have been uncomfortable, but it has accelerated our cultural exchange significantly. As Mary departed, the glowing markings still visible beneath the borrowed jacket, Ta Wu couldn't help but smile at the absurdity of the situation. In all the first contact scenarios they had trained for, no one had anticipated that different standards of modesty might be the first major cultural hurdle to overcome. He activated his team communicator. "All personnel, we need an immediate briefing on this development. And someone prepare appropriate clothing gifts for our Nari hosts. It seems we have much to learn about each other's customs." The morning after Miri's unexpected visit, Ta Wu called his team together for an urgent meeting. The 6 humans sat in a circle inside the main habitat module, faces showing a mix of curiosity and concern. "Last night's encounter has revealed a significant cultural difference we must address immediately," Ta Wu explained. He described his conversation with Miri in detail, emphasizing the opposing views on appropriate formal attire. "So their scholars actually present themselves without coverings as a sign of honesty?" Su Bin asked, taking notes on her tablet. "Exactly," Ta Wu replied. "While we see clothing as respectful, they see it as a potential form of deception, hiding one's true nature during important exchanges." Minji, who had been quietly considering the implications, spoke up. "This explains so much about their settlement design. Have you noticed they have few internal walls? Their living spaces are open, their activities visible to all. Transparency seems to be a core value in their culture." Du Hyun nodded. "And we've been doing everything opposite to their customs. Private sleeping quarters, multiple layers of clothing, closed-door meetings. They must think we're incredibly secretive." "Which could explain their caution in sharing technology," June added. "They value openness. We've been sending signals of concealment." Ta Wu stood and walked to the habitat's large viewing window. Outside, the twin suns of Proxima had fully risen, casting their amber light across the crystalline Nari settlement. "We need to adapt, at least partially, to their cultural norms if we want this mission to succeed. But we can't just start walking around without clothes," Yun Ho objected, voicing what several were thinking. "No," Ta Wu agreed with a slight smile. "But we can make compromises. More transparent operations, fewer closed meetings, and perhaps clothing that signifies our roles more clearly, similar to how Miri's markings identified her as a knowledge keeper." The team spent the morning creating a new approach to their interactions with the Nari. Su Bin, with her background in anthropology, suggested adapting their uniform design to include visible symbols of each person's specialty, color-coded patches and insignia that would allow the Nari to identify their roles at a glance. By midday, a small delegation of Nari approached the human camp. Leading them was Mire, now wearing a simple garment that resembled a loose robe, clearly an accommodation to human sensibilities. Behind her walked 3 other Nari, each bearing distinctive markings that the humans now understood indicated their social roles. Ta Wu and his team met them outside, wearing their newly modified uniforms. Each human now displayed clear symbols of their specialty, medical symbols for Minji, engineering patterns for Du Hyun, and so on. "We welcome you," Ta Wu said. The translation crystal Mire had left with him, converting his words into the musical Nari language. We have considered what we learned last night and wish to adapt our ways to better honor your customs. Miri's fur rippled with blue tones that the humans were beginning to recognize as pleasure or approval. And we have come with similar intentions, she replied through the crystal. Elder Siok wishes to apologize for any discomfort caused by our different traditions. The eldest Nari stepped forward, his fur patterns more complex than the others. Knowledge exchange requires understanding of differences. The translation came. We have been studying your kind as you study us. Perhaps today we can truly begin to see each other. What followed was a remarkable day of genuine cultural exchange. The humans invited the Neri delegation inside their habitat, removing the privacy screens that had sectioned off different work areas. In turn, the Nari explained the significance of their various body markings and the cultural reasons behind their emphasis on transparency. Our ancestors, Elder Siok explained as they shared a meal together, evolved the ability to change their fur patterns to hide from predators. But among ourselves, hiding became associated with deception. Our civilization developed around the principle that truth requires visibility. Fascinating, Minji replied. Humans evolved in environments where covering ourselves was necessary for protection from elements. Over time, clothing became associated with civilization and propriety. As the day progressed, both species found a comfortable middle ground. The Nari visitors wore simple garments that satisfied human notions of modesty, while still displaying their important cultural markings. The humans, in turn, made their work and living spaces more open and explained the purposes of various coverings they used. By late afternoon, Elder Siok made an unexpected proposal. Tomorrow, we invite you to witness our knowledge-sharing ceremony. Normally, this is reserved only for Nari, but we believe including your species would honor the spirit of our traditions. Tabu recognized the significance of this invitation. We would be honored. How should we prepare? Wear your role symbols proudly, Mirai instructed, and bring your questions. The ceremony is about exchange of truth. After the Nari delegation departed, the human team gathered again to discuss this development. This is unprecedented, Subin said excitedly. First contact missions usually take months or years to reach this level of cultural integration. It's all because of the misunderstanding, Ta Wu observed. Mirai's visit forced us to confront our cultural differences directly instead of dancing around them diplomatically. That evening, as Ta Wu recorded his official report to be transmitted back to Earth, he reflected on how a potentially embarrassing cultural mishap had transformed into the key that unlocked meaningful exchange. Sometimes understanding begins with confusion, he dictated into his report. What could have become a diplomatic incident has instead created a foundation of mutual respect. By acknowledging our differences openly, we've discovered something profound, that different paths can lead to similar values. The Nari value honesty through visibility of form. Humans value respect through appropriate covering. Both approaches serve the same ultimate goal, establishing trust between individuals. The next morning, the human team prepared for the knowledge-sharing ceremony. They wore their modified uniforms with the role symbols prominently displayed, and each carried a small gift of knowledge. Data crystals containing information about Earth that the Nari had expressed interest in. As they walked toward the central crystal structure of the Nari settlement, Yun-Ho moved beside Ta-Wu. Do you think Earth will understand what we're doing here, adapting our protocols this way? Ta-Wu watched as Mirai and several other Nari emerged to greet them, their fur patterns shifting in what he now recognized as expressions of welcome and excitement. I think, he replied quietly, that this is exactly what first contact is supposed to be, not just following rigid protocols, but building genuine bridges of understanding, even when those bridges begin with stepping into uncomfortable territory. 1 year had passed since the night Mirai had entered Ta-Wu's tent and changed the course of human-Nari relations forever. The small research outpost had grown into a thriving joint settlement, with structures that blended human engineering and Nari crystal growing techniques. Where once stood separate camps now existed a unified community, the first of its kind in human history. Ta-Wu stood on the observation platform of the newly completed Knowledge Exchange Tower, gazing out at what many back on Earth were calling humanity's greatest diplomatic achievement. Below him, humans and Neri moved together through the settlement, working on shared projects and conversing through the now perfected translation crystals that everyone wore. Reflecting on how far we've come, Mirai asked, joining him on the platform. She wore a garment that represented the cultural compromise they had developed. a light covering that met human standards of modesty, while still displaying the important knowledge keeper markings on her arms and shoulders. It's remarkable, Ta Wu replied. 1 year ago today, you walked into my tent and nearly caused an interstellar incident. Muri's fur rippled with the blue patterns that humans had learned meant amusement. And now that incident is taught to all new arrivals as the perfect example of turning misunderstanding into opportunity. The tower beneath them housed the joint research facilities where human and Nari scientists worked together, sharing technological and cultural knowledge. What had begun as awkward exchanges had blossomed into true collaboration, with breakthroughs occurring almost weekly. The medical team says they finally adapted the Nari regeneration therapy for human physiology. Ta Wu said, early tests show it could extend human lifespan by decades, maybe more. And your energy conversion systems have helped us improve our crystal growth techniques, Mirai replied. The new structures require half the time to mature. A chime sounded throughout the settlement, signaling the approach of an important moment. Ta Wu checked the time display on his wrist device. The Earth delegation will be landing in 30 minutes, he said. Are you ready? Mary's fur shifted to the deep purple that indicated determination. I have practiced my speech many times, still addressing humans who have never met a Neri before. It is challenging. You'll do wonderfully, Ta Wu assured her. Remember, they chose you specifically because of your role in our first contact. There's a certain poetry to having the Neri who created our biggest cultural confusion become the first ambassador to Earth. They descended the crystal lift to the settlement's central plaza, where humans and Neri were gathering for the welcoming ceremony. The original 6 members of Ta Wu's team stood at the front, now joined by 40 additional scientists and diplomats who had arrived on subsequent missions. Alongside them stood 24 Neri, including Elder Siuk, whose support had been crucial in establishing the alliance. The distant roar of engines announced the approaching Earth vessel. Unlike the small research ship that had brought Ta Wu's team, this was a diplomatic cruiser carrying representatives from the United Earth Council, including the Secretary General himself. Nervous, Su Bin asked Ta Wu as they watched the ship descend toward the landing pad. A little, he admitted. We've come so far so quickly. I worry Earth might want to move even faster now. The Nari have shown remarkable patience with us, Su Bin said, and they've been clear about their boundaries. I think today will go well. The ship landed with precision on the crystalline pad, specially grown by the Nari to accommodate human vessels. After the engines powered down, the main hatch opened, and the Earth delegation emerged. Secretary General Hio led the procession, his eyes widening slightly at the sight of the assembled Neri. Despite all the videos and images transmitted back to Earth, seeing an alien species in person was still a profound experience. Ta Wu and Mirai stepped forward together. Secretary General Hio, on behalf of the joint human-Nari settlement, we welcome you to Proxima, Ta Wu said formally. Thank you, Dr. Park, the Secretary General replied. Your work here has exceeded all expectations. He turned to Mirai and bowed slightly. And Ambassador Mirai, it is an honor to meet you. Your willingness to serve as the first Nari representative to Earth is deeply appreciated. Mirai performed the formal greeting gesture, all 4 arms moving in the precise pattern that had been taught to the Earth delegation in preparation for this meeting. The journey between our worlds is long, she said, her voice translated perfectly by the advanced crystal she wore, but understanding bridges even greater distances. The ceremony proceeded smoothly into the settlement's Great Hall, where both species had prepared demonstrations of their shared achievements. Human and Nari scientists presented together, showing how their combined knowledge had accelerated progress in medicine, materials science, energy production, and cultural understanding. The translation program has been our most successful initiative, Minja explained to the Earth delegation. What began as a simple tool has evolved into a comprehensive cultural database that helps prevent misunderstandings before they occur. May I see an example? Asked one of the Earth counselors. Minji nodded to a young Nari assistant, who activated a large crystal display. The screen showed footage from the now famous first meeting between Ta Wu and Mirai, carefully edited to maintain appropriateness while still conveying the cultural confusion that had occurred. This initial misunderstanding, Minjai explained, led to our first breakthrough. By directly addressing our cultural differences regarding attire and privacy, we established a foundation of honest communication that has served us well. Secretary General Hio watched the presentation with interest. And you believe this approach could work for future first contact scenarios? We do, Ta Wu replied. In fact, we've developed a new protocol based on our experiences here. Instead of assuming universal standards, we now begin by explicitly exchanging information about basic cultural norms, particularly those involving personal space, communication methods, and appropriate attire. As the day progressed into evening, the settlement came alive with a celebration that blended human and Neri traditions. Music from Earth played alongside Neri tonal compositions. Foods from both worlds were shared, with careful attention to which were safe for each species. In the center of the celebration, Ta Wu found a moment alone with Mireille. "Tomorrow you leave for Earth," he said, "the first Neri to visit our world." "I go as a bridge builder," she replied. "Just as you were here." "Remember what I told you about human handshakes?" Ta Wu asked with a smile. Mary extended one right hand in the practiced human gesture. "Firm but not too firm. Maintain eye contact. 2 shakes only." "Perfect," Ta Wu laughed. "You'll do fine." As the twin suns of Proxima set on the horizon, casting their amber light across the settlement, Ta Wu couldn't help but reflect on how much had changed because of one confusing night 1 year ago. What could have been a diplomatic disaster had instead laid the foundation for humanity's most successful alliance with another intelligent species. In the year since that night, both humans and Nari had learned that true understanding often begins with misunderstanding, and that the bridges built in the aftermath of confusion could be stronger than any constructed through perfect protocol.